Hello everyone, welcome to What If Issei becomes the true dragon of Rias Gremory Season 1 Part 2. Before we start, please go support marcusbm2005 for writing that awesome fanfic. Now let's begin. Chapter 5. Choice. Familiar forced, inside teammate's cave. Who is there? Is that you, Dreg? Asked a shocked teammate as she neared the pink gem, hoping it would be her old friend. She got slowly closer, reaching her hand out to touch the gem. It began glowing much more brightly at the contact between the two. Issei moved slightly as she made contact, making her retract her hand, worried that she did something. The gem's bright glow began to die down, then reappeared in a pattern-like state. "Hello there, Dragon King teammate, I am not Dreg," spoke the almost stoic voice. It was so familiar to teammate for some reasons. It hit her a second after, as Issei grunted. "Issei?" asked a surprised teammate, moving closer to the gem again. Her eyes had small tears forming in her eyes, they began to threaten to roll down. There was awkward scene until the gem began speaking again. "Yes, it is I, Issei, but at the same time no." He spoke, his voice still stoic. Teammate didn't quite understand what he meant by that, her face showered her confusion. Issei sighed at this. "I am like Dreg now, I am a scared gear. At least I think I am, not quite sure on that part. I am like a past host, the host and the scared gear all in one." Issei began mumbling the rest to himself, his voice still stoic and uncaring. Teammate was having a hard time to follow or even really understand what he was saying. How can you two, how can there be two of you?" asked teammate as her voice became shaky at the end. Issei said nothing as he was pondering the same questions, the gem glowing as he sighed or breathed loudly enough. "I don't know, must have happened when we got reincarnated, I was only awakened now since." What was her name again? "Oh right, Kaneko has began reaching far enough to unlock up our memories," he said, his voice did not match how he should feel. Shouldn't he be happy, shouldn't he be worried about her? These were the thoughts going through teammate's head. "Why don't you sound emotional?" she asked. Again Issei pondered this question to the best of his capability. "I don't know, I guess since I am the soul of my former self, or maybe because I went insane before I killed Trihexa, I have no idea." "I am sorry," he spoke, more like it was fact compared to the way he would talk when she had met him all those years ago. She had founded Issei and Rias Gremory in the familiar forced, trying to recruit her to the war against the Chaos Brigade, but she had tried to kill Issei, because he was the host of Dreg. "It's fine, but if you're like a scared gear now, why didn't you wake up early then before Kaneko began my plan to remind you of your past self?" asked teammate as her focus drifted to the sleeping body of Kaneko hugging herself tightly onto Issei's head. "Kinda cute, not now teammate." She put her focus back towards the gem, where Issei's voice was coming from. He was wondering about how he should answer this, since it might make her sad or angry with him, even as a emotional soul he did not want to feel her wrath. "I chose to not to, as it would ruin everything he has now with you. He is like me before I was thrown into the supernatural and became who I was once. He deserved no, I deserved this, I didn't want no, I couldn't take being a part of this world anymore, the same way I wanted my rest." His voice became emotional as he kept speaking. Teammate was taken aback by this, she would have thought that he would have wanted this the most out of anyone in this world. "What do you mean? I thought you would want to be reunited with your friends, your family, your loved ones." She asked, worried about the way he was acting. This was not the Issei she had met so long ago. He can't be the same, unless this is his true emotions. No, he would try his best to get back to them. She thought. She became worried when the dragon version of Issei began grunting and panting in pain, as his body became even more metallic. She reached a hand out to his face. "It's too late, I suppose. I could always do the impossible, but now I can't." He spoke in a low voice. Teammate moved her head back to the gem, her face both worried and slightly hopeful of the Issei inside the gem, giving her son his memories back. "We'll let him have his old life back. Would you let him rejoin our world again, in a less painful way?" she asked as her hope began to rise higher and higher. It was shoot down as Issei's next words were bone-chillingly haunting even for her. "Never. Brainer, Fenrir, Volley, the Juggernaut Drive, Loki's Curse and Trihexa will stop her. I made them for that porpoise, and even if she sucks then she will unlock his insane state that I was left in when I died all those times. He will never have that cursed life again." The gem soon began stop glowing as he cut himself off, the metallic body of Issei began spreading faster as he began feeling more pain. Teammate had tears rolling down her eyes now, as her son's pain was too much for her to bear with. She sobbed quietly as she had to stop this from killing him and many innocent people. "I am sorry Issei dear, Mom only tried what any mother would. I wanted you to find happiness again. I am so sorry." She hugged him into as she changed her form to her true form. A blue western dragon now hugged him instead. Her tears were almost invisible on her blue scarls, but the sobs and cries were still there. Inside Issei's head, Kaneko was laying on the ground after her fight with the tag family that was Loki and his kids. Should anyone ask her about her opinion on dogs, snakes or Norse, she would give them a fist to the face and gave them each a 100 points for being assholes to fight alone. Why did I have to fight them alone? Can't really complain as beat the unholy daylights out of them. Issei would be proud, she enjoyed the though of him being able to again give her head pats. She felt her wounds had begun to be healed, they didn't hurt as much as they did before, but the frostbite was still gnawing at her left leg. The pain was bearable now, but if something were to attack with full on in her next fight, she would definitely not be able to last long enough. She sat up as she tried to analyze the damage on the rest of body that she might not have seen or felt while fighting. Lucky she found only small scratches and bruise. Nothing major, thanks Satan. She got off her butt and stood for a second check if everything was okay with her legs, which after a few seconds of standing, it seemed it was. Okay, now to wait for the next opponent, hope it's something easier, like Fried or maybe Volley. No, he would not be here, I think she thought as almost on K the body of Fenrir began to grow in size as it soon expanded at an alarming level. It consumed her and everything on the battlefield in grey void of some sort. Inside the void Kaneko floated in a sense, her vision was blurry, her mind half awake at times, and her sense of time was gone. She then saw a light open in the middle of the grey void, a rift began opening as the light became much more blue than white. Kaneko began to feel herself begging a whack again, her mind working fully again. Kaneko, you must stop before it's too late, yelled out the voice of teammate throughout the rift in the void. How can you speak to me right now? Wait, what do you mean? Why shouldn't I keep going? I am almost there, I think, she yelled back, confused about teammate's sudden change of mind. We've been tricked. Issei's memories were sealed by Issei or something like that to give him a good life. If we realize his memories he will go insane, she yelled again. Kaneko tried to prox what she had just heard. Had she really been leading Issei slowly towards insanity with each foe she defeated? Are you sure? Wouldn't this person just try to trick you? Kaneko yelled back as her head was not willing to leave to let Issei stay living like this. Not will she could do something. I am sorry, but I can't let you continue as his body is transforming right now and it's hurting him. Please stop or me and everyone in the supernatural will have dragon on their hands to fight against, she yelled back, her voice began becoming weaker as the rift started to close slowly. We don't have much time, just get out of here now, teammate yelled again as the rift closed completely. Kaneko now alone again in this grey void, pondering about what she should do. If I stop he will live, but he will never old family. But if I keep going then he might kill everything and everyone. Kaneko was working overtime as her mind couldn't take all this. So, what do you choose, little kitten? Kaneko looked around frantically as she tried to find the new pre-scene she had just felt. Her head was turning at abnormal speed as her body began to ready itself for whatever was to come of this. Where are you? Show yourself, she ordered, her face serious as she glanced around, trying to see or even sense the new arrival. The void suddenly began to turn in color, becoming much more pinkish. It soon turned the entire void pink, like she was in a girl play toy comical without the whole set yet. I am right here, or rather everywhere. I am Issei, or rather his old self. The now pink void spoke, as it glowed with each word spoken by this being that called itself Issei's old self. Don't you dare call yourself that. If you were his old self, then you would never have sealed his memories away, she yelled as the statement made by Issei was not something her Issei would do. He would try to come back to them at any cost, he never run away from his past self like that. I am though Kaneko, I am the old Issei, or at least a memory of him. You see, I chose to let the new live a happy life, something I never got the chance to live thanks to you people. I never wanted to feel all that pain or suffering, but stuck it out for you. His voice had been stoic in the begin, but it turned so harsh as soon the part about his life began. It scared Kaneko to think a part of Issei has entered her and everyone else for revining him and bring him into the supernatural. And now you two are ruining my plans for my new self. I like teammate as his new mother, I like his new life, even if maybe violent, but at least he was not just thrown into unwillingly like I was, so leave me alone so I can stay in here and live my life as ghost of my former self. His voice had anger, resentment and hatred in the begin, but it became more like sad man's voice when he no longer felt the will to live. This is not my Issei, you're not my Issei, cried Kaneko at this harsh and sad story that Issei had lived and was now showing how much he really hated it. But I am Kaneko, the one and only Issei Haidu, the Red Dragon Emperor and fiancé of Rias Gremory at your service. His voice was now much more stoic, slow and smooth. Kaneko felt her world fall apart, her sadness visible as her tears started to roll down her chins. Here was the real Issei she lost all those years ago, rejecting her and his former life. Her mate, her one true love, her Issei. The man that the impossible, possible. The greatest and strongest Red Dragon Emperor and the strongest being at one point in the entire supernatural world, even respected by greed, rat and office. And here he was denouncing it all like a bad memory. Wait, if you really hated it all this time, then why would you use your worst memories as a defense against anyone who would come into your mind? Kaneko had felt something click in her head at the last part of her train thought. The pink void became very quiet at accusation, as if Issei didn't know how to answer. It was a eerie scene, as Kaneko was having a staring contest with the void, kinda at least for her. I use them as defense too. To protect my seal on his memories, I mean my memories. Enough of this nonsense, just leave already Kaneko, or it won't well for you, he spoke, his voice seemed strained as if he was trying to stay calm. Why should I? I don't trust you anymore, you're not my Issei and you've proven it by not acting like he would. You're only coping him and you're bad at it, I might add, she yelled back, her will to fight returned to her as she had figured out, hopefully, who she was talking to right now. Again the void was seen as it didn't know how to answer her statement. Kaneko took this as if she had hit a bullseye with that one. What are you talking about, Kaneko? I am the one and only Issei, why would I act like I was him, when I am him? Geez Kaneko, can't you just let me rest in peace? He asked as his voice sounded more tired, and Kaneko noticed that. This was definitely not Issei, as he would never speak so harshly about his friend and family or his past life. That was not who Issei was, he looked forward even when he was scared he would try to move forward. Stop pretending already, you're not Issei, and you wanna know why? Because he would never let something like his past define him or make him too scared to run away from his past, Kaneko with determination yelled as her voice seemingly cracked the void they were in. A person fell through one of those cracks. It was Issei, but felt wrong and more like a mask than the real him. He landed on the ground as he looked at her with anger and slight fear in his eyes. So you figured it out. So what, there is still no way you will ever see him again, even if you defeat me there are still more waiting ahead, you can't defeat us all, Issei Haidu will never have a good life, he yelled as his body began to morph into pink void again. He was completely gone again from Kaneko's sight, but now she could sense him and knew where he was, but now the problem was is he gonna do now that his main plan has failed? As she thought that, a part of the pink void shot towards her in the shape of Spike. She jumped out of the way, dodging it easily. He fired more at her, which she dodged with little effort too. Just stand still and let me impale you already, he yelled in frustration as he kept sending more at her, draining him of his energy slowly while she was fine and barely breaking a sweat. This kept going until Kaneko had begun to make him drawings out of all the spikes. She would never admit it, but she was having fun messing with him for messing with her and maybe also teammate. Fine, I give up, I am not getting anywhere with this, you can leave, I don't care anymore, he yelled. His frustration was clear as he had spent the last half hour throwing spikes at her and having her dogged every single one. He even formed himself in the void again. His form was different than before, it was shadowy version of Issei, and it had very big and very angry expression on it. He snapped his fingers as a hole in the void opened up, leading to the next stage that was Issei mind. Are you giving up so fast? What happened to the whole I will never let you free him thing you had going before? Kaneko asked as she had calmed down quite a bit over this. I just don't care enough anymore that Rainer may say she is the most self-aware one of us all, but she is self-aware as all of us, I am the only one who is smart because Issei saw me as a smart opponent, so of course I would try to trick you into giving up. But now I see I can't do anything other than lie, I really am only smart and good at tricking people. He moped as if he was a small child. In Kaneko's eyes it was cute because he looked like Issei, and at the same time it made her angry that he would just give in like that, mostly because he had the face of Issei, even if it was just black shadowy mess. Do you really think I would fall for your trick? That hole is a trap and you are my only way forward. Don't keep playing this game of trickery and using others' feeling against them. I will kill you, not only to get further, but also for warring a mother and making a lover fear that she have hurt that she loves. Kaneko spoke with a much more calm voice, but the anger could still be felt in there, mostly towards the end. He looked up at her, as if showing her she was right. I hereby give up, save the kid if you can, kitten, he smirked. Kaneko fired off a beam of Senjutsu at point-blank range. He was dead, he would no longer lie or trick people. Now then lead towards the next opponent, I know you can hear me, I will take you all on if I have to, she yelled as she powered fully up, her ears and cattails suddenly felt tingly, as suddenly her ears felt bigger and her tail split off into two different tails. Kaneko felt proud, but she didn't have time to enjoy this show of her new power as the gate to her next opponent opened up. She went forward with even more power than before as her love for Issei and determination to realize him given her the mental willpower to do this. Here I come. Underworld, Gremory territory. In the Gremory territory, in the Gremory mansion, in an office room with a Victorian style too in every way. From the sofas to the bookshelves that were built into the walls of the room itself and even to the two objects hanging over a quite large desk. On said desk sat a red-haired woman, Rias Gremory, the Archduchess of the Gremory territory, as her father had stepped down after the battle with Trihexa. She was beautiful, anyone could see that. From her perfectly smooth hair to her body, which had every asset that any woman would be jealous of, to her face, which held a certain charm that no one could really describe in words. She was doing paperwork as she was the leader of the Gremories as well as their territory. Her father had tried to help her with it, but she had just said that it would befit her to let a retired man do work. She could finally see why her brother would at any given chance try to run from his work, as this was just hell and she was born in hell. She sighed as she sat back in her chair looking up at the almost empty roof of her workroom. She sighed again as she turned her chair around to look at the two hanged objects. One was a white gauntlet with blue gem in it. This was the piece that Issei had taken from Vali, the wielder of divine diving, in their first fight. It had cost some of his life, but at the return of his friends being safe. The other one was a sword, a long and sharp one at that. It had a golden handle with a gold hilt with 4 claws sticking out of it, with a long sharp blade coming out in between. This was Ascalon, the greatest dragon-slaying sword known to the supernatural. She looked at them as she reminisced about the old times when Issei was still around, and the only real problem, for her at least, was him not saying her name. Such simpler days, if only I could go back in time. She thought as her gaze dropped to the picture beneath the 2 artifacts, as she called them. The picture was of her and her remaining peerage when they had gotten ownership of the Gremory territory. They looked happy, they were happy. She loved and hated the picture. She loved it because it was a show of how great her friends were, and she hated it because it was missing the person who had made them all great. She stood up from her seat and walked towards one of the 2 large wall-sized windows and looked out at her territory. She sensed her peerage roaming around the mansion and her kings walking around the territory to keep it safe. A smile was seen on her face as she felt happy about this, though it became more sad when she imagined Issei standing next to her. As her mind was going down towards old and sad memories, she failed to notice the black-haired beauty that was her queen. Akon moved up behind her. "Rias, are you okay?" she asked as Rias suddenly jumped from Akon's sudden entrance. "Yes, I am fine, just thinking about things. Like usually." She spoke, her voice being calm. But the slightest bit of sadness could be heard if one listened close enough. "Well, that is good. I came here to inform you that Kaneko has been gone for over 2 hours now. She should have been back at least an hour ago," stated Akon. This cut Ria's attention as Kaneko was never one to be late or not to notify if something had gone bad. "That is strange. Send Zenoiva and Asia to go check on her." She spoke as she looked back towards the window. Akon bowed and then proxed to leave, sending Zenoiva and Asia off to check in on Kaneko and her peerage. As Rias was looking out into the vast underworld, her sense suddenly felt a weird aura coming the 2 objects on her wall. She walked toward them, slowly, so she could jump out of the way if she had to. She looked at them, seeing that they both began sending out a much more refined aura than before. It had become pure in a sense, will still have the same feel to it. Her worries began growing much faster though when the 2 artifacts began having cracks appear on them. "No. No, don't do this to me," she screamed as she rushed forward towards them to maybe fix them or something to not make them disappear. But as she dashed forward, the 2 artifacts broke and left only pink dust particles. Rias fell on her knees, her eyes began to be filled with tears already. She had lost the only 2 things Issei had left behind, besides the clay statue, and now she had nothing left of him that gave the same feeling like those 2 had. The door to her room was sprung open as a worried Akon, Roswis, Asia and Zenoiva had heard her screaming. They found her on her nest crying. They tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't answer. Zenoiva looked around the room to find anything out of place, then she saw it, and her face lost all of its color. The others soon saw it as well. The 2 hanged artifacts were gone as if they had never been there. Crying and sobbing could be heard, but only really Rias, as she was the one most heartbroken about it. "Issei, I have failed to keep this one small gift of yours safe. I am so sorry, I am sorry." She kept thinking like this for the rest of the day. Her peerage had to drag out of the room and into her bedroom where she fainted from just pure sadness. They knew now that if she were to lose anything right now, then she would maybe never truly recover again. Which reminded Akon at that moment that she needed to send Asia and Zenoiva to check in on Kaneko, which was now a priority number 1, as losing Kaneko could seriously damage Ria's mental stat even further than it already is. "Asia, Zenoiva, you 2 have to find Kaneko and bring her back safely. That is a direct order, understood?" They both nodded and opened a teleportation circle to the familiar forest. "I just hope she is safe. Oh dear, today could not get any worse than this." "Right?" asked Akon as she and Roswis left Rias in her bed to regain her strength. Chapter 6. Returned. In the newly made Lucifer mansion, inside of Lilith. Inside a quite beaten up looking training room, stood 3 fairly handsome men. All of these men were quite young, though you would only think the blonde was, as the 2 others were the ones who had gotten so into training that had almost completely destroyed their own training room again. These men were Arthur Pendragon, Bhikkhu and Vali Lucifer. Vali and Bhikkhu were panting heavily as their bodies each had bruises and small wounds, thanks to them be bored and wanting a good fight. And because of that, Arthur had to discipline them. He may not be the strongest in Team Vali, but he is the king at dashing out punishments, so the 2 knuckleheads had stopped fighting at the first word of a future punishment, too scared to do whatever Arthur would have them do. I have said 1,000 times this week alone, stop destroying everything, even if it can reconstruct itself, that don't give you two the right to destroy it near the point that it can no longer function, yelled Arthur as the two others were listening closely to not make him even more mad. Okay, we won't go this far again. Shrug off Volley as he and Bhikkhu had gone through their almost hourly 20 minutes worth of Arthur lecturing them. He in turn just sighed as he knew he would have to do this again in an hour time or so, as these two had just become so easily bored ever since Haidu had died. I get that for Volley, but why Bhikkhu? Can't he just fight his predecessor? Odd Arthur has made his way out of the room. So we gonna start fighting again, right? Asked Bhikkhu as he was already in a perfect stance. Volley just shrugged at him and went to sit down a bench outside of the battle area in the room. He then looked up at the now confused Bhikkhu, who was funny enough still in a stance ready to fight. No, I think I am gonna take a break for today, besides it's not worth Arthur a headache over us being bored, because there is no one left that we haven't fought and won over, spoke Volley, at the being in a normal tone, then turning a bit more sad at that last bit. Bhikkhu knew what he meant and decided to go upstairs to let Volley be alone, as he did sometimes, but not so much anymore. As Volley heard the door to the room being closed, he moved his back off the wall and summoned his scared gear. A blue glow appeared for a few seconds until a pair of silver-white wings with crystal blue-like wing parts. Hey Albion, have you sensed the new red drive? No, I have not, Volley. Drake is still in a sleep like Tracen until a host has been found. Spoke the strong voice of Albion, as he once again had been awakened for this one singular accusation. Okay, then you go back to sleep or whatever you do in there, Volley said as he prepared to unsummon his scared gear. Fine partner, I'll be waiting for our next wait what? Screamed Albion loudly so the whole room shook. Volley closed his ears with his hands to not be made deaf by whatever Albion had just been shocked by. What the hell is wrong with you, Gramps? Asked Volley, slightly annoyed that he almost lost his hearing. Albion however didn't answer as he seemed to have just kind of disappear into the gear. Albion, you there? Asked Volley a bit worried, as Albion normally don't just leave without saying something. He heard someone running towards the room, thanks to him being on full alert. Soon after the door shut open, as Kuroka stormed inside followed by Arthur and Bhikkhu. They looked towards the slightly worried Volley, then started scan the room for anything to be out of place. After finding nothing they all put their focus back on Volley, who seemed to be less tense than before. Volley, what is going on? Why did you suddenly release such a powerful power wave? Half of Lilith felt that, and we have one of the Mo's inside our house, wondering what is going on. Spoke Arthur as he moved closer to Volley, who had regained a bit more awareness as he sent surges, just like Arthur had said. I didn't send it out, it was Albion, he sent something, and now he won't speak to me. I don't know what is happening. He answered back, as he was just as clueless as they were. Kuroka just looked puzzled at him, as she seemed to remember something else that made her think the following. Could this have something to do with Shiren's sudden angry signature seeming to fade a bit? She wondered, but she soon pulled back to the current Isus as Surziches had seemingly entered the room without her noticing. Interesting, are you sure his compult unable to talk? Asked Surziches as he moved closer to Volley, scanning him for any magic or aura that shouldn't be there. Volley just backed away as he put his hands up in a defense manner. No, I have been at home for the past 2 years after I won that supernatural rating game for the second time, he spoke, then an idea poked into his head. Sudden his scared gear appeared out of his back. Albion, can you hear me? He asked again. Yes, oh thank the dragon gods, I have been trying to reach, but it seems the gear had gained some weird bug. But that don't matter as I have wonderful news, he almost roared in joy, which made all the other people in the room confused as to what would he be so happy about as he had just been stuck in the gear and couldn't speak to his host. What do you mean? What could make you so happy? Asked a now confused Volley as he raised an eyebrow at the sudden outburst from Albion. You remember the piece of your gear that Issei took from you in your first fight? Asked Albion with a weird joy. Volley just nodded slowly, not really getting what Albion was talking about. It has just been returned to its user. Albion spoke, making the group of people even more confused, as why would he be happy about something like that to this extent, and why would he show it in front of the person who loves that thing the most in the world's older brother? Is he trying to get himself and me killed? Oh Volley as he sweat dropped and dreaded looking at the most definitely angry Grimson Mao that was highly overprotective of his sister, and more so now that she was not herself anymore after losing Issei. Albion, speak carefully, spoke Volley in his mind to Albion. I know how this sounds, but it's not the part of it returning that should make you sad, rather happy as it is returned to its host. Albion spoke as if they should all know what he was talking about, like they all knew what his cryptic words meant. So Volley has taken one of the two things my sister holds dear from her. Spoke a very unhappy Surziches as he was realcing a Grimson aura around his body. I wasn't talking about Volley, geese, me and Drake were right to think of all the factions as idiots compared to us dragons. Do I really have to spell it out for you? Asked Albion as everyone in the room nodded besides the even more angry Surziches as he was not that happy at the current moment. Wonder if I can kill Soul without killing the host, it is a part of he thought. Albion just sighed and then began to speak. Who else besides Vali has used the ability of Divided in this current generation of Dragon Emperors? He asked as he didn't really feel like giving a straight answer, not that it mattered as almost everyone went wide-eyed at what he said. Albion, don't joke about that, you know Issei is dead. Right? Asked a very confused and almost worried Vali, only to receive another roar from his scared gear. Why would I lie or even joke? I am the heavenly dragon Albion, the dragon who stole the principles of supremacy from God. I will put my own name on the line. I speak no lie, nor ever have in my whole life. Anyone knew that dragon were a race of pride, and that pride would never let lie and not hate themselves for it. Issei is alive was what everyone thought at that moment. How? He is. He shouldn't be alive or else I would found his energy or aura years ago, shouted Surziches as his past years of mourning, along with his family and sister's peerage, have been wasted time that they could have searched for Issei. I have failed as an older brother for two people if what Albion is saying really true, he thought as he clenched his fist, letting his aura subside and returning to normal. I know not, but I only know that he alive and well, where he is I don't know yet, but I feel other strong auras near him. I will try to search for his aura, but I will need help so that I can find him or at least somewhere near his location. Spoke Albion. I will help, as I am a bit of expert in that area of magic, said Kuroka as she moved closer towards the two dragonic metal wings. Her magic began mixing with the wings as the two began searching for Issei aura. Surziches spoke again, stating that this stays between the people inside of this room, or else the Devil Council will try to stop them as they were never a big fan of Issei to begin with, as he gave the mass much more power and respect from the people of the underworld. Bastard each and every one of them, at least that is Surziches' opinion on the matter. He soon after left Team Vali to their own, as he began to think over if he should tell this to the other mass or to his sister, maybe. No, why spoil a great gift like this one? He didn't like having secrets from others, but this one was too important to let even one other person know about this. He smiled sadly at the thought of his brother-in-law having to survive for the past 13 years all on his own. But if he had been alive all that time, then why didn't he come back? Surziches kept wondering about this as he teleported back to the main castle of Lilith and giving a statement about the recent shock throughout Lilith as the leader of the Lucifer clan, having a rather hard training session and had broken his room almost completely. In the familiar forest, quite close to where our Dragonis and Kitty 2 are trying their best in each of their own ways to help Issei get his memories. A red circle, the circle of the Gremory clan, had appeared on the ground, spreading out to a full 2-meter length across. Soon a red light hid the circle in its crimson light, it soon after died down to show two young women standing where the circle once was. Zenoiva had her battle suit on, while Asia had her oh-so-classic noon outfit. They began to scan their surroundings, feeling the nearby angry of Kaneko being quite close. You sense her too, right? Asked Zenoiva, receiving a nod from her blonde friend. Yes I do, though it feels quite weak, I worried that something might have happened to her. Spoke Asia as her worries became clear as she shocked a bit at the thought of something bad having happened to Kaneko. Don't worry, Kaneko is one of the strongest people I know, she won't go down by anything in this place so easily. Okay Asia, let's go towards her location. Said Zenoiva as she held onto Asia's hand, rather tightly for someone who had spoken as if nothing was wrong. But Zenobia was also worried, as Kaneko was her friend, but if she also acted like she was worried like Asia is, then they might not see an enemy trying to attack them. I have to be brave for me and Asia. Issei, look over us, please, she thought as she led Asia and herself towards the angry signature of Kaneko. Though as the two got closer they began becoming a slight bit more worried as they could feel two dragonic auras near hers. Zenobia tightened her grip on Asia's hand, making her winch a little of the sudden pain. Do you feel that aura too, Zenobia? Asked Asia, her voice holding a much larger and growing fear as just by this small amount of aura being leaked, they could both feel that these dragons were no joke. Zenobia flinched slightly as she felt something detecting her, making her doubt if she should even say anything, but felt she had to stay strong for Asia. Yes, and I think that they have felt ours too. Zenobia spoke slowly as she was trying to think what their next step should be. They then heard rustling in the bushes around them. Zenobia went into a combat stance at the first sound she heard. Durandal out and ready. Who is there? She demanded as Asia moved closer to her, trying to sense out their enemy's angry or anything to give them more info on their opponent. The bushes continued to make noise as branches were broken off or snapped by whoever was behind them. The sound stopped, making the two prepare for anything as Zenobia tightened her grip on Durandal. Then the sound of multiple slaps were heard as what sounded like cries for forgiveness were made as some leader figure began punishing them. You should know better than to try and attack Lady Zenobia and Lady Asia, what won't Kaneko think of your actions, yelled she. The duo headed towards the conversation and hid behind a bush, looking through the branches and least seeing Neen, the queen piece of Kaneko, seeming to be scolding 5 of Kaneko's other peerage members. Asia and Zenoiva looked at the scene, then to each other, but couldn't hold it together, as this was the kind of thing they needed to calm their nerves. They giggled quietly, then made their way through the bush and moved towards the entirety of Kaneko's peerage minus her. Neen saw them and moved over to them and bowed. Lady Zenobia, Lady Asia, I am sorry for not showing ourselves earlier, as I had to dispel those idwaits. I am so sorry, she spoke, making Zenobia giggle again. It's fine, me and Asia needed that. Zenobia said as she brushed off her appendages, along with the ones who had tried to attack them earlier. Asia didn't really mind, though then again that girl could never get mad about anything really. Neen looked back towards to wondering why they were here. Lady Zenobia, why, if I might ask, are you both here? Kaneko hasn't called for reinforcements. She asked, as she knew what she was doing, but needed to make sure of what reasons these two would have to come here, as they normally stayed close to Rias. We have come to return you guys and Kaneko home to Lady Rias as. Something has happened that Kaneko needs to be informed about. Spoke Zenobia as her more professional side came out. Neen knew that she was serious and that she'd be careful with how she should give them the info, as she had understood that this dragon, or rather Issei, was a rather sensitive subject for Kaneko, so it might also affect the rest of the people under Lady Ria's household. Of course, Lady Zenobia, I will give you the information of her whereabouts, but I ask you not to freak out. Lady Kaneko is currently with Dragon King Tiamat and her only child. We found out after fighting the dragon we had been sent to talk to that it was her child, or rather her son. She spoke, making Asia and Zenobia release a heavy breath, thankful that she is with Tiamat and not some powerful evil dragon of Rivzivum. Thank God, but if I may ask, why is Kaneko then with Tiamat and her son and not with you? Asked Asia, as her voice had become a more controlled, though still as soft as ever. Neen flinched at this, which Zenobia noticed. What are they doing? Surely Kaneko would have been done with this hours ago. Asked Zenobia as she moved closer to the nearly sweating Neen. She wasn't trying to hide anything, she just didn't really what she could say and couldn't say. Well, you see. How do I put this? Tiamat's son wants to be her familiar, so I would guess they're talking about that right now. She spoke, stuttering on a few words. Zenobia scanned her face close, seeing her sweat bullets running down her face in an almost comedic fashion. Why would making a dragon into a familiar take this long? It's obvious, yes, or maybe Kaneko also has these Asia-like traits sometimes. Thought Zenobia, as she was and is still to this day a bit of an airhead. But why would that take so long? And why couldn't you just have sent a message back in the meantime? Asked Asia, taking Zenobia and Neen a bit by surprise, as she rarely ever took the charge in anything. I didn't think about that, said Neen, putting her hand to her chin in a thought way, as she too could be a bit of an airhead. After a moment she regained focus on the 2 other ladies in front of her again and began speaking. Well, I guess we have not been very smart, I am sorry for worrying you. She said as she bowed, getting a few laughs from the girl she had scolded earlier about thinking things through more. She gained tick mark on her forehead. Well, what's done is done. Just lead us to Kaneko and Lady Tiamat, I would like to meet her again. Said Zenobia, making Neen wipe the others into line, then leading the peerage, Zenobia and Asia back towards Tiamat's cave. On their way, Asia began getting a lot questions from the pawn with the healing powers and the single bishop, asking her about healing spells and ways to train your body and mind to suit your role better. While that was happening, Zenobia made small talk with the 2 knights, with the same type of questions as Asia's. Asia then had small thought pop into her head, which she had become interested in. She went up to Neen, who was leading the group along the wild trail, which in truth was just her getting one of the rooks to punch through bushes and such to make the way clear for them to walk on. Excuse me, but would you happen to the name of Tiamat's son? I was just wondering, since it would be rude to not know his name, as he is a dragon prince. She spoke in a way that made Neen giggle a little and smile at her cute thought train. Of course, Lady Asia, well, first off, there isn't anything called a dragon prince, and secondly, he isn't her biological son, he was appointed by her after the fight against the beast. She said, making Asia look worried as she had said something wrong, but to Neen it was just too cute. If only Kaneko could these kinds of faces, if only, she thought, as an image of a worriedly cute Kaneko looking around like she did something wrong dance around in her head. But he would probably be given that title, since it took Kaneko's strongest attack to end the fight, though it did leave a massive wound. He is quite strong, close to his mother's strength as far as I could tell, definitely Dragon King level after a few more years. Neen spoke again, now also gaining the attention of Zenobia as she liked fighting, not in wars, but for training and fun. Asia looked at Neen with a surprised face and spoke. Wow, really, from what I could sense he was already stronger than Tiamat, in terms of aura at least. Making Neen gulp at the thought of fighting him at that level. Oh really? Geese, she must have had a few seals on him or something like that. she said, thinking that she would no longer hold back against a dragon, as those things began slowly becoming more terrifying. Almost every dragon in the world sneezed as they felt someone both fear and respect their power. Back to the girls, where Zenobia moved up to Asia and Neen to ask something. "Hey Neen, I think you forgot to tell us his name, or does he just not have a name?" she asked, as Neen remembered and getting embarrassed by her many hiccups today. "Oh, sorry, I had forgotten. Yes, he does have a name, I think it was Issei or something like that." She spoke as she failed to notice the two ladies stopping dead in their tracks. The rest of her peerage saw this and stopped too, making the group quiet as only Neen's footsteps could be heard, which made her turn around to see the scene of a blank Zenobia looking at her and a depressed Asia staring into her soul. There was an uncomfortable still scene that followed as no one moved or talked, only short breaths could be heard. It was then broken by Zenobia. She fell to her knees looking into the dark ground below her hair covering her eyes. The ground below her then began forming a small pond of water, or rather tears, as small sobs could be heard from Zenobia. How Asia still stood standing was mystery to Neen, as she had always seen her the one to always cry first. But instead she started sway, then fall on the ground. She luckily got her fall softened by one of Kaneko's rooks, catching her mid-fall. Neen moved slowly towards Zenobia, hearing her sobs and fast inhaling and release of air, her body began to shake. As her sobs soon to change to borderline cries, her face moved up to Neen's, making her see the sad and crying mess that now was Zenobia. She tried to speak to her, but she couldn't form any words. This is just like when Kaneko learned about his name from Tiamat. Are they also his old friends? Then why haven't I heard or seen any picture of she was cut off, as Zenobia reached her arm out in the air. This is Issei. She began crying even more than before, even started leaking some of her power out, making the peerage in the ground shake at the sudden pressure. She kept this up for a few minutes as Neen looked on stunned and left for words. Here was Zenobia, Lady Zenobia's second knight of Rias Gremory and one of the 10 strongest swordsmen and women in the underworld, crying like any other girl. Who is this Issei guy? Was Neen only thought as she kept standing there, not knowing what to do. Chapter 7. 2 or 1. Inside Issei's mind, the gain beam of Yujutsu was piercing through the body of the beast as it roared in pain, even more so when the beam disappeared, leaving its upper torso with a gained hole in it. Its body fell forward as the light in its eyes died in a matter of seconds. On a nearby cliff stood Kaneko, breathing heavily as she had used the same attack multiple times at the most power she could muster. Now she had a chance to breathe and rest. That should be the last one, she thought, as she could feel her legs starting to give out. She sat down as the ground shock from the body of 666 fell onto the ground, creating a dust cloud-like wave moving away from the body of 666. Kaneko, seeing this, got a feeling of pride, as she had just killed the strongest being in existence, and in Issei's mind. I don't why, but I had kinda figured I would had to fight against the Juggernaut drive. Or maybe boobs. The latter mostly, she thought, as her mind had become calmer after her fight with Trihexa, so now dumb things and such was just streaming in. She closed her eyes, resting them as she put both of her arms behind her on the ground as support, as she bent backwards as she wanted to feel more relaxed. As she was resting, she heard something. She steered her eyes towards the sound while listening carefully to the sound, making out to be footsteps. Light but a bit heavier than her own, they came closer to her. She tried to scan their aura, but she couldn't somehow. She tried to smell out who it might be. But the wind was towards the person walking to her, making her sense of smell useless at the current time. The footsteps stopped a few feet away from her. She decided to open her eyes to see this mysterious person was. Before she could her eyes, as she was still rather tired from her last fight, the person spoke to her in an unforgettable voice. "Hello Kaneko, been a long time, hasn't it?" spoke Issei happily. Kaneko shot her eyes open at his voice, turning her whole head to the direction she heard his voice from. There he was, Issei. His soft yet shining brown eyes, his spiky hair, the smile he always wore around them back then. She felt lost for words. Her heart wanted to say so much, but her body couldn't say it fast enough, making her words come out as weird and kinda cute noise. Her eyes had tears already going down her cheeks, her face having the most beautiful smile ever, her cheeks wet and also had a light blush. Her happiness was almost too much for her, she could barely believe he was right in front of her Issei. She began crawling towards him slowly, he in turn began walking to her. He went down on one knee as he held up her shaking body, as she buried her face in his chest, staining his old school uniform with her tears. He put a hand on the back of her head, as he held her caringly, she began sobbing much more quickly, as her tears became fewer. Issei. I have missed you so much. So much so it hurts, I can't believe I can have you back. She spoke, her voice rather weak as the crying had drained of energy, along with the battle before. Me too, I have missed you and the others too. He spoke, his voice was happy, yet calm. Kaneko moved her so that she looked into his eyes, and when she met them at this distance, she could barely hold herself back. She moved in and took her first kiss in over a decade. His lips were just like she remembered as she got more lost in her love for him like she did all those years ago. To her dismay he didn't kiss her back, she opened one of her eyes to see him just looking at her. She moved back from their kiss, worried that she did something wrong. Aren't you happy to see me? She asked, hoping her fear would not be true as her emotions took command over everything at the moment. He sighed slowly, closing his eyes then reopening them, though now they had changed their color to that of gold. His smile also faded a bit, making Kaneko think he was sad about something, but what could be wrong? They were together again. "Kaneko, you remember the spirit of Loki's curse?" he asked. She didn't quite understand, only nodding to gain answers as her worries began growing. Well, he was speaking truthfully, at least about me being no more than a ghost of my old self. He spoke, his smile was no longer truly happy, and his eyes seemed more sad and dead than golden and shining. "What do you mean? Aren't you the no, not anymore. Now he is," he said as he pointed with his other arm to the sleeping dragon form of Issei, which had suddenly appeared. Kaneko was more worried about something else though, and that was the many chains and locks around his body, almost like he was a prisoner. "I am the old Issei, but only a mask of his real self. If he was truly still alive, then he would kiss you the moment he saw you." He smiled at her, making her feel both sad and happy. She moved her head into his chest again. "So what I have been doing was all for nothing?" she asked, gaining a small giggle from Issei. "No, well, your goal was to free the old me, but instead you have just let me gain a chance to say goodbye for him, as Issei is truly and sadly enough dead." He spoke as he put his arms around her, hugging her tightly as her sobs were heard again. Her hope had been crushed, her whole drive for this one single goal had brought her so far, but for what? Only a single last moment with her beloved in the form of ghost of himself. Why did I do all this? What is my reward for going for so much pain? A single moment with a person using my loved one's face as his mask? She asked, her voice changing from sad to hopeless, then angry. You did it for him, he will be given the memories and Issei old life. You will still gain back your Issei, but just not the way you wanted. He spoke, his voice soft and caring as he moved to her ear, whispering something in them that made Kaneko moved away shocked from him. Her face began to cry again, but it was once again from happiness. "You damn pervert, always and forever the enemy to all women in their hearts." She spoke much more happy than before. Issei smiled at her sudden statement, titling his head to the side. "As I would always say, boobs are a way of life, I will stand by that until the day I die." He spoke, cursing the two to laugh a bit. Issei, after regaining himself again, stood up, reaching his hand out to her. She looked at it for a bit, then deciding she should take it. He leaned over towards the sleeping dragon Issei, stopping a few meters away from his body. The chains making rustling sounds as his body breathed in and exhaled air. He turned to her, moving one of his hands over one of hers. He opened his hand, letting a small key drop down into hers, which made Kaneko confused until she looked back at the dragon. He had chains and locks all over his body, and now she had a key to one of these locks. She looked back up at Issei's face, his calm face and friendly aura still surrounding her. She wanted to ask him, but she was almost certain that if she did then he would just say something else that might hurt her more. "I know this is going to be hard, but you must do it. Not for me, for you or anyone else, but for him. He is a child who will soon be given memories and powers he could never have dreamt of. And he will need his mate's help." Kaneko looked at him, her eyes begging to be filled with tears again, as she knew he was right. "So when I have used this key, he will know me like before?" she asked, her voice having a hopeful tone, along with the bitter thought of him possible rejecting her. Issei put his hand on her head, petting her like he used to. "He will remember you, and only you for now. The others must all travel through their bond to get him back, but thanks to you it won't be as hard." He spoke, Kaneko understood it somewhat. He stopped petting her and moved back, his smile fading again as his face became more stoic. Kaneko didn't understand why at first, but she got the idea that maybe her time with him was up, and so she turned to the sleeping Issei and began walking towards him. Every step felt so heavy, as a memory sprang in and out of her head. She didn't look back at Issei, as it would only make this harder. She stopped in front of his sleeping body, the rustling chain sounded much more like a simple melody at this distance. It was pretty in a way. "Once you put in the key, both you and him will wake up again. Take him to the others, take him home for me please." His voice didn't sound stoic at all like she had imagined it to sound like, it felt happy. She turned her head to see a young man with brown spiky hair, a scar on his left cheek, a stumpy beard, and that all-welcoming smile. She saw Issei, the Issei who survived and lived with them in Underworld. She didn't cry as she knew he wouldn't like to see her cry, she just smiled as she turned her head again towards the sleeping dragon. Click. One of chains fell onto the ground, making a metallic sound that could be heard all around her. It began to glow in a pinkish color, as it soon began to become many small particles that blew into the air. She looked back to the sleeping dragon, seeing his now open eye looking at her, it was shocking as it looked at her. She could hear something like small and weak sound that animals would use when they felt scared. She reached her hand out to him, he moved his head to feel her touch, he began pouring at the connection between the two. Pervert, welcome back. Then the familiar forced outside of teammates' cave. Neen and her fellow peerage members had somehow gotten the now shaken and pale duo that was Zenobia and Asia to walk little by little closer to teammates' cave. They hadn't been able to talk to them as they would just straight up ignore them, and when they did get an answer they just mumble the name Issei, and I missed you. It was getting creepy at this point. They had lead them for the past half hour closer to the cave, and they had finally made it. Neen had told the other girls that they could go on patrol or just rest, as today had already had too many things happen. Here we are, are you two ready? Neen asked as Zenobia along with Asia just stared blankly at the cave entrance, then to her giving her what she would call the creepiest stare in her life. Good, I'll go. She was stopped as the two women began walking towards the entrance, passing by her without a single word nor glance. Why are these people so fixated in this Issei guy? I don't get it, she thought as she decided to walk to some trees and rest. But Zenobia and Asia, they were walking down the cave as the light of the purple sky outside soon died out and replaced with what seemed to be glowing fungus, making the cave glow with a bluish light. The two, after walking for what felt like an eternity, they were finally face to face with the auras of three different powerful beings. One being Kaneko, who they could only guess was behind the second one, which was the gained blue dragon also known as Tiamat. The other aura was also behind Tiamat's body, but they could sense that both its aura and power was definitely as strong if not stronger than Tiamat's was. They walked slowly towards the front of Tiamat's body, where they heard what sounded like crying and sobbing as her neck and head were cold around the body of what they now saw was a young male red dragon. But they both could now feel his aura much better, as they could sense the aura signature of Issei inside of his, along with others, mostly Trihexa's. Issei, they both spoke weakly as they stepped closer, 1 foot at a time. Their steps were almost silent, but their worried breaths were not, and it was noticed. They couldn't breathe as the sight in front of them made their hearts arch. It hurt them almost as much as when they talked down to him and spoke hate words to him, back when things were so much simpler. Asia fell to her knees as her body had become so weak. Zenobia couldn't move as she too had become weak by this. The two looked at this dragon that was supposed to be their Issei, but how could he be? Everything except his aura had changed. He was no longer the same brown-haired boy they fell in love with, he is still the same boy, he has just forgotten his past, spoke the gained blue dragon. She sobbed a little at the end. The girls looked at her as they didn't know what to do, nor what to really think. The dragoness moved her long up and turned her head to meet them face to face. Hello, I didn't welcome you early as I was well. Trying to help my son, Tiamat spoke as the two girls looked at her, they saw how her eyes looked hurted and worried. I am guessing that Neen told you who my son is? She asked. Zenobia and Asia nodded, but rather slowly as they could barely hold a toddler. Well, it is true, my son is the reincarnation of Issei Haidu, though now he is just Issei. She spoke as her voice had gotten soft, she knew how these girls felt and was trying to ease them into this mess of confusion and hurting, that was the truth of Issei's new life. Zenobia looked back to Issei's body, a small tear rolled down her cheek, as it fell and hit the ground. Zenobia decided to look back to Tiamat. Why? Why didn't you tell us or anyone that he was alive? She spoke quickly as the most anger she could muster was heard in her voice, her eyes had narrowed enough to make her look mad, but she was still too weak to bring it all out. Tiamat lowered her head, like a devil or other races that were humanoid would as a bow. I am sorry, I kept him hidden for my own reasons, and also because. He had forgotten everything, only his name was left in his mind. She spoke, still bowing to the two who had become shocked at this new information. Well, what do you? Do you Tiamat Sama, how could he forgot? Asked a timid Asia, her voice was confused and hurt all at the same time, making her unable to keep her words together. Tiamat sighed deeply, then looked up at the two. I do not know, but he just has. I tried many times to hopefully bring them back, but it never seemed to happen. Again I am sorry, truly. She answered, making Asia sob quietly again into her hands. Zenobia just lowered her head, her hair blocking her eyes as she trembled slightly. Zenobia looked back up at Tiamat, her eyes still hidden behind her hair. How long have you taken care of him, as his mother? She asked, confusioning Tiamat and Asia at the accusation. Tiamat thought for a moment, a small smile appeared on her face at the happy life she had together with her son. For 11 years, I found him a few months after the battle with Trihexa, he was just wandering around looking for something or someone. I took him in as my own that day. She answered back, her smile seemed almost beautiful as thought of her time with Issei. Zenobia kept her eyes covered, but the sound of water dripping on the ground could be heard coming from her. She lowered her head, much like a bow. Thank you so much for taking care of him when we should have. I thank you from deepest part of my heart, Tiamat Sama. She said, shocking Tiamat as she had thought that this information would have made her more mad, but instead she was thankful for her taking of him so many years. Asia stood up and moved beside Zenobia, bowing as well. I would like to thank you too, teammate Sama. Teammate didn't really know what to do, she was grateful to them for not being angry with her, but at the same time she felt shameful over never having tried to tell them about him being alive. You don't have to lower your heads to this terrible mother, I never tried to tell anyone he was alive, all because I didn't want to let him go after how he looked at me, like he was my real son. I am so sorry for myself, Ness, she answered them trying to bow, but was stopped as she heard Issei grunting in pain again. Asia and Zenobia heard this too, they both gained in worried expression at this. Almost on instinct Asia ran to him and used her scared gear to begin healing him, while teammate coiled herself around his body again, hoping she could ease his pain with her motherly embrace, as nothing else had worked. Zenobia looked on as she felt shame in not having the ability to help her one true love. She moved over to his head, seeing Kaneko sleeping next to his head as her arms were wrapped around him. She decided to do the same. She put her head against his head, closing her eyes. I am so happy to see you again, even if you're not the same on the outside, I hope you're still my Issei on the inside. She thought as she felt his aura encircle her slowly, almost like a hug of some sort. She did the same, she felt his aura touch hers, entangling the two together like when you tangle your fingers with someone else's. Her mind began to blank as the sounds of surrounding area slowly faded away from her. Then light came as fast as the darkness before it. Inside Issei's mind, she felt like she was flying, no like she was soaring over the clouds. Suddenly clouds began appearing around her as land far below grew out of nothing. She felt at peace in this wonderful state, she soon after spotted a gain flat cloud further ahead of her, drifting peacefully across this damn near perfect sky. She wanted to land on it for some reason, she began to bash her wings to gain more speed and soon after she landed on the drifting cloud island. So pretty she thought to herself as she kept looking around. She then spotted a young man, dressed in the Cow Academy male uniform walking towards her. She narrowed her eyes to analyze him and then she spotted his long spiky hair, only one person she knew had that kind of hair. Issei, she spoke quietly as the figure came closer and closer to her. She didn't want to wait and so she began to make a dash towards him. He saw this and stopped up and opened his arms with his face showing her that friendly smile that she could never forget. Issei, she yelled as tears began streaming down her face. She jumped at him, landing on him and pushing him down onto the ground. She moved her arms around his waist and she hugged him tightly, crying into his chest. He giggled happily as he put his arms around her as well. Hello Zenobia, how have you been? He asked her, smiled gently towards her, she moved her face up to meet his eyes, those gently brown eyes of his. She still had tears coming out of her eyes, but her happy smile proved that she was over the moon with happiness. I miss you Issei, I have missed you so much Issei, she cried as she held him even tighter than before. He only giggled a little at her cute answer and reactions. I see, I have missed you too, my knight, he spoke softly as her eyes only became wetter with her many tears. She moved her head up to his and slowly lowered her lips to his. She kissed him for the first time in almost 12 years and felt as good as it did back then, but she noticed that he didn't do it back. She moved away slowly from the kiss and looked worried. It's okay Zenobia, but I am not the real Issei, only a ghost. I can't do what he could, but he would have loved to kiss you one more time. He said as his smile became a bit smaller. She looked blankly at him. So you really are dead. She tried to say more, but her sadness was too much and her eyes made small waterfall as the amount of tears were almost comical. He put his hand on her head and patted it slowly while tightening his grip on her. It's okay, his memories of you are still in him, Issei himself is dead, but not his new self. So don't cry for his sake Zenobia. He spoke softly, letting go of her slowly and pushing her softly off him. He stood up again as he reached an arm out to her, she only looked at it confused, but then decided to take it. He led her further and further towards what seemed to be the middle of this cloud. When she got closer she saw the body of the sleeping dragon Issei. Why are we here? She asked as they continued to walk her closer to him. He then suddenly stopped and moved to the side, letting go of her hand. I want you to, and the others to him his old life back, but let him still be his new self. The boy has suffered enough, as his whole life has never been easy ever since he came into this world of magic and gods. Issei spoke as he reached one of his hand over to her. Take this and let him find his peace with his family again, both new and old. For his, mine and Issei's sake. He spoke as he dropped a key into Zenobia's hands. She looked at it, then looked at him only to find him gone. She looked around, but found nothing other than the sleeping dragon, which she now saw had chains and locks all around him. She felt like she knew what to do and began walking closer to him. Every step felt so heavy as an old memory of them together started playing for every step she took. She reached him and the chains and locks resulting as his body inhaled and exhaled. It sounded like music every the chains resulted. She held the key out and put it into a lock and turned it. Click, a chain fell onto the ground. After it hit the ground it began to disappear in pixel-like pink light, flying into the sky. She looked at Issei, her heart couldn't really care anymore if he was a dragon or not, as she felt that he was Issei. Her Issei. Don't try to get his children just yet, he is only 11 years old, and at least ask Tiamat for permission first. Zenobia turned her head to where the sound had come from, to see an older version of Issei. She smiled happily at him and waved towards him, he did the same before he turned around and vanished into the clouds like mist. She looked longingly at the place he had stood for only brief, yet eternal moment. I love you Issei and will always do so. She spoke hoping for just one last answer from him. She instead felt in someone looking at her, she turned to the eye of dragon Issei staring at her. It was not easy to see, but there were some small tears building up in them. She hugged him as they soon faded away like the older version of Issei had done. Then the familiar forced inside Tiamat's cave. While Zenobia had entered Issei's mind, Asia and Tiamat had been too focused to notice as they were trying their best on stopping whatever was making Issei wince and growl in pain. It had stopped around the same that Zenobia had fallen asleep next to him, holding on to him for dear life. As such Tiamat and Asia had become calm, while both were weirded out by the fact that Zenobia's seemingly first action to help him was to fall asleep, as they had not seen nor felt what she had before falling asleep. It's okay for now, but the pain. It will come. It won't stop anytime soon and I don't what it is. I can only heal it away if I knew what it really was. Said Asia as she breathed heavy breaths with each word, as she was not only at her mental limit but also her emotional. Tiamat looked at her with an understanding of sort, as she too would love to have that kind of power. I understand young devil, but only gods can have such. Tiamat stopped herself as she realized something she should have done years ago. She started giggling sadly. Asia looked at her with a confused face. What do you mean? Did you remember something that could help? Asked Asia in a much more lively voice, as her eyes had a small glint of hope in them. Tiamat began glowing a bright blue color, it began shrinking to the size of a human woman. The glow retracted itself, revealing Tiamat in her human form. She reminded Asia a lot of Rias, just blue hair and a bit more revealing choice of cloths. I do, well we both do, how I never thought about this is beyond me, but I think they might want to help. She spoke as her face gained a beautiful smile. Asia just idled her head confused, as she didn't quite get what she was saying. Who did she know that was God and would maybe help Issei? Tiamat only giggled a bit more at Asia's obvious confusion. I will try to get them here to help, then you'll see who I am talking about. Take care of him and the others in the meantime. If anything happens that you don't think you do anything about, then you're welcome to call in help, as he will most likely re-enter our world in the next few days or weeks, no matter what now. She spoke as she started to form a dragon gate. Asia just looked on, as Tiamat left through the gate to only she knows where. Asia looked back to the bodies of her two friends and Issei her one true love, it was still almost too good to be true, but here he was. It may not be the same body, but he was hopefully still the same person even without his memories. She then thought back to what Tiamat had said, as she continued to think on it a bit more, but still reaching no conclusion on who it could possibly be. Organic Deus, Aka Earth. We see two men sitting in a park all alone, with only each other and no one else. The fountain was shooting streams of water into the air to the sides, all of it made for the quiet sight in such a small park, the clear blue sky with almost no clouds in it and a bright sun shining down. The perfect day for being outside or maybe a date. The wind blew by, ruffling the two men's spiky brown hair, landing a few small green leaves in the older looking one's hair. Just my luck, gotta look good for my date. Damn leaves. He spoke as he picked out the leaves with his hands. The other much younger looking one just looked on, with an amused smile, giggling a little at his troubles. The older one just shot him a glare back. What, it's funny to see you get annoyed over small things, when you should be mad about our current one. He spoke as the older one just sighed as he sat back into the bench the two sat on, hanging his down over the bench back. Well I have to, or I would just curse problems for me. No or kinda. You know what I mean. Besides as you know why I am like this, gotta look good for my date comes. He spoke seriously as the younger one just sighed. I know, just teasing you is all. I guess you're right, I do take after a cone in some ways don't I? He asked as another amused smile crept onto his face. The older one sat back up again looking at him with a more relaxed smile. Yes you do, I made you like them after all or else I would have gone insane in after the first week. He spoke as he looked at the fountain still spewing water into what seems like an eternal pool around it. I know, but this will end when she comes. And then we can no longer stay here, no matter how I know and I am ready, have been for a few years now. The older of the two interrupted, smiling happily. The younger one stood up and then began walking towards the edge of the park they were in. If you say so, I'll be getting ready for the last few of them, they miss you a lot you know. He said as he stopped and looked back at the older one of them, who stood up as well and looked back at him with a bright smile. Oh I know, I only let them see for a brief second as promised, they look so happy. But as we promised, I'll talk with her myself, after the one before her you can finally have your rest, you beast. He chuckled lightly at his joke, the other only sighed at his antics. I still don't get how you beat me or even made me your friend, Issei. But our time together has been something I wouldn't hate to have had before, and don't worry, I won't forget. I am not like those weird ghosts of yours. I actually never really cared about destroying this world and never had any real hatred towards you. Spoke Trihexa as it turned around again and walked out of the park, vanishing into thin air. Issei just sighed at its weird way of talking and doing things. If I ever get trapped with someone again, let it at least be Drake or a hot woman and not someone I killed, so awkward sometimes. He only sighed as he looked at the fountain again. But it is right though, soon all of this will be over. What to do in the meantime? He just sighed as he sat back into the bench, stretching his body and began moving around until he was in a comfortable post-ion. He closed his eyes as he began humming to an old song from his TV show, then giggling as he couldn't make himself sing the rest. Oh god, why did we ever say yes to that show? Why did we, Rias? Maybe I'll ask when we start our day. He asked as he laid back into the bench and starting taking a nap. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.